Hi guys, welcome everyone. My name is Vera and today I'm going to show you how to paint our spring birdhouse here with flowers and cute little bird. Now before we start, let's go through what kind of tutorial is this. First of all, this is a video recording, so feel free to pause it at any point. Give yourself enough time for every step, and then whenever you're ready you can resume it and join me. I'm going to be going at my comfortable speed, but you guys go at your comfortable speed. So make sure to pause it whenever needed, and then whenever you're ready, you can resume it and just continue painting along. Also, this is a watercolor tutorial, so I'm going to be using a watercolor paint plus white acrylic paint. So majority of my paint is watercolor, literally all of it except white. But white, I'm going to be using acrylic. You guys are welcome to do the same. You're welcome to use a watercolor paint plus white acrylic paint or white ink, just because those are a little bit whiter than white watercolor. White watercolor tends to be quite transparent, and white acrylic and white ink tend to be a bit more, just solid white. And that's what we're looking for this particular painting. So you're welcome to do that. If you don't have watercolor, not a problem. You can use acrylic. You're just going to need to water it down really well. You're going to need to literally use like almost like a dirty water consistency of super watered down acrylic paint. So you're welcome to use that as well. As far as what kind of colors we're going to get to later once we move on to our painting part. But generally, I would say watercolor, they usually come with a variety of colors. So if you have any watercolor palette, it will work, because majority of those colors is standard. So any watercolor palette will have them, even the most basic one. And those that are not standard, I'm going to show you how to mix them out of standard colors. So as far as watercolor, any palette will do. If you're using acrylic, again, you can use just primary colors and mix from primary colors, or you can just look at this painting and grab all colors that you can see here, such as brown, a couple greens, yellow, orange, reds, pinks, and so on, black and white, of course. So up to you, but again, we'll get there once we move to our painting part. For right now, we're actually going to start with a sketch. So what you need right now is you're going to need a piece of paper. This is what I will be using. This is a watercolor paper, 9 by 12 inches. That's all. It's pretty standard. Again, it's not anything crazy. You can buy this in any art store and likely even in Walmart or Michael's. So I'm going to grab a piece of paper, and we're going to need a pencil. We're going to need an eraser, and we're going to need a ruler. Ruler is not super necessary, but I do find that it's very helpful to have because there are a lot of straight lines here. So if you do have a ruler, your lines are just going to be a little bit straighter than if you don't have a ruler. So that's why I would suggest grab a ruler if you have it. So what we're going to start with is we're going to start by putting one line right in the middle of our paper. And the reason why is because we want our birdhouse to be centered in the end of the day. We want it to be just nice and straight. We don't want it to be leaning one side or the other side, and we don't want it to be like one side bigger, one side smaller. So we want it to be symmetrical on both sides, or as symmetrical as we can get it, and we want it to be straight. So that's what I'm going to start with. I'm not going to measure top and bottom. I'm just going to eyeball it and put one line in the middle. Again, eyeballing it. I feel like my line is a little bit to the left. I think I could go a little more to the, sorry, if it's a little to the right, I think I can move it a little bit to the left. That should be better. Oh yeah, that's good. So I started with one line right in the middle. Now I'm going to identify where my top is going to be. So I'm going to put a little dot there. So do you see the top, where the top is going to be? It's up to you how far from the top of your paper. It really doesn't matter. I would put somewhere right here, just like a little dot, for me to know that this is the top of my birdhouse. Now the next measurement that I'm going to do is I want to measure out this. So how far is my roof going to go down? Again, you don't have to measure it, just approximately think, where do you want your roof to end? So for me, I think I want my roof to end somewhere around here. And again, wherever you want your roof to end, that's where you're going to put a straight line. Just make sure it's somewhat the same distance on both sides. Put a straight line. So now I know where my middle is and where my roof is ending. What I want to measure next is where my sides are going to be. So both of those sides, you want them on equal distance from the edges. So again, I will go by this. I would say I'll measure out, I don't know, this amount from the side. Now you can literally measure it out with a ruler. This is actually just under 2 inches, by the way, for those who are using the same size paper. Let's make it exactly 2 inches, but it really doesn't matter. As long as it's the same distance from the sides, it doesn't matter what distance that is. So let's say 2 inches. 2 inches, 2 inches. And I'll measure them out here too. So 2 inches and 2 inches. And now I'm going to put straight lines. So straight line, straight line. Awesome, pretty great, right? All right, now it's time for us to move on to our roof and start working on our roof. So under this dot, remember this top dot, I'm going to put another dot a little bit lower. I would say 1 centimeter-ish lower, so a little less than half of an inch, I would say. But again, it doesn't matter. And then from this dot, I'm going to connect it to this dot, but go a little bit further as well. So do you see, connecting this dot to this dot, and just a little bit further. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side too. Connecting this dot to this dot and going a little bit further. And now I'm going to measure this on a side here. So from this to there, the same distance as from this to here. And I'm going to add another line. So connecting top dot to this dot now. And going a little bit further as well. Oh, this looks pretty good. And then just gonna grab those and we'll erase. So now we can erase this line, we don't need it anymore. This horizontal one. Any loose ends, we don't need those anymore either. I might correct this one and make it a little bit lower just to, make sure this is kind of consistent, because right now in my case it's a little bit less here and a little bit more there. And I would like it a little more consistent, so let's just change that quickly. All right, this looks very good. I'll erase this line as well. Not bad, right? Okay, so now I want to know where the bottom of my birdhouse is going to be. Here, I would say the bottom is about the same as the side. So this, and this is about the same distance, but again, it's totally up to you guys. So for me, this is 2 inches, so I'm going to measure up 2 inches from the bottom. And I'll measure them here and on here. But again, if you don't have a ruler that actually has the measurements, just eyeball it, the same distance, and then put a straight line. That's all. You don't need to have a ruler with the measurements for this. Okay, and now we can erase all those loose ends here too. Okay, now we're going to divide this. So right now it's divided in the middle. We don't need that middle divide. What we need is we're going to need to divide it into three equal size-ish wood planks. So that's what I'm going to do, just approximately. You can erase this line right away, really, you don't need it. It's just confusing actually at this point, so let's get rid of it. And now we're going to divide this into three. So I would usually go by bottom, and I would try to divide it equally into three parts on the bottom here first, just for me to know what that looks like. This looks about right. Yeah, looks about right too. So let's just connect those dots. And if it didn't turn out right, then we'll redo it. It's not bad. This one needs to go a little bit higher. Oh yeah, that's better. And now I'm going to add a heart somewhere on the upper part here in the middle. And we're going to add a little ledge underneath. So something like this. Do you see how it sticks out on both sides a little bit? You guys are doing a great job. All right, so we have this done. So the structure of our birdhouse is ready. Now we're going to move to our bird and to our flower and to our leaves. And I'm actually going to start with a flower. And I'm going to add our leaves, and only after that I'm going to add our bird. So for the flower, I'm going to start it somewhere right here. And I'm just going to start by adding the middle of my flower somewhere right here. So just like a little circle. And then from there, I'm going to start adding leaves. You can make it bigger, you can make it smaller. It's completely up to you. And leaves don't have to be all exactly the same. They can have various shapes. Some can be, slightly different. They don't have to be exactly the same. I want to erase everything underneath my flower petals right away. So that's one flower. add this middle too. And then I'm going to add second flower. It's going to be smaller. It's going to be somewhere around here. So again, I'm going to start with the middle. I'll position my middle somewhere here. And then I'm going to add the flower petals. Alright, so here are two flowers. Now I want to add leaves. So I'm going to start by just positioning the branches first. So one branch is going to go from somewhere around here all the way here. And again, it's just approximate. And one branch is going to go from here up and down. Again, this is all super approximate. All right, and now it's time to position our leaves. So I'm gonna start, let me show you the original here. Let's talk about our leaves for a second. Do you see how leaves are closer to your flowers? They're a little bit bigger. And then as they go higher, 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 they get smaller, smaller, and smaller. And that's pretty much the goal. Again, they can have different shape, they can have a different bend, different curve towards different ways. So they don't have to be like a copy-paste the same leaf. Variety of sizes and shapes is really good here. So make sure they vary and they're not the same. And again, try to make them bigger as you start and then just slowly make them smaller and smaller as you go. And remember, because we're working with a pencil, you can always erase it and redo it. You don't have to settle for something that you're not happy with. And some things don't always turn out right from the first time. In fact, they rarely do. So if they're not just the way you want them from the first try, that's okay. That's perfectly normal. So just redo it. And notice another thing about the leaves that I want to point out here is notice they're a little bit chunkier in the middle. So what I'm doing is I'm adding one curve, right? One curve. And then from this corner, I'm adding another curve. So it ends up having pointy corners where it grows from and on the end. And this very nice and chunky middle. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for pointy ends and a chunky middle. I'm happy with this branch. So I'm going to erase everything that's underneath those leaves. It's not too confusing because again, they're not transparent. They're not see-through those leaves, so it makes sense that we wouldn't see the birdhouse behind them. All right, that's one branch, and let's add a second branch somewhere around here. All right, so that's our flowers and our branches. And now we're going to add our bird. So the bird is going to be positioned somewhere in between our flowers. So the body is going to be positioned somewhere around here, and the head somewhere around here. So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to start with the body. I'm going to add almost like an oval right here. So starting somewhere here, I'm adding almost like an oval. So you don't have to continue this oval all the way because, again, it's going to be hidden on both sides, so you don't need to, but just assume that it's an oval going all the way. All right, I like the shape more actually. Okay, so you see our oval, it looks like egg almost. Now we're going to add a head. So here, not at the end, a little bit further in, we're going to add a little neck. And from there, we're going to add head. Then there's going to be beak somewhere around here. There's going to be a little eye here. And then we're going to zone out the colors on our bird. So this is going to be one color. This is going to be another color here. And the wing is going to be somewhere here. And of course, we need a little tail. So our bird has a little tail. It's hard to see there, but it's there, and it goes this way. So basically, if you could see it, it would be right here. So I'm going to position it this way, and then I'm going to erase everything that's behind our flowers and leaves, because again, flowers and leaves are front, right, and the bird is back behind them. And ta-da, we have our sketch. So the only thing that's missing now is two more little flower buds. So I'm going to add one here, and the tiny little leaves around them. So I'm going to add a couple leaves right here. I'm going to add a flower bud right here. And I'm going to add one more right here. Maybe a couple leaves around it too. And of course, if you guys feel like there should be more flowers or flower buds or leaves anywhere else, absolutely go for it. Just add them in wherever you feel like. I'm also going to add later on a couple like greenery right here. So it's going to be a stem, couple branches. I'm going to get closer for this. You see a stem, a couple branches, and then a whole bunch of little seeds or whatever they are, those things. So I'm gonna add those. You don't have to sketch them. It's really easy to do them with just the paint. However, if you prefer to sketch them, you can. And those could be berries. I'm not really sure what they are. I'll add one more here too, because on this particular painting that I'm doing right now, it seems a bit like an empty spot. So again, guys, don't go by what I'm doing generally, and don't go by this painting, by the original that I made here. Go by what yours looks like. So if you have a spot that just seems bare and you feel like, oh, this could be nice to have something here, add it in. Absolutely. Do what needs to be done for your painting. So for me, this is perfect. So I'm going to stop, and now we have our full sketch. And that's pretty much it. So another thing I want to do before we move on to actual painting, especially for the leaves and the, well, not as much for the flowers, but for the leaves for sure, is I want to lighten it up a little bit, because I don't really like when my pencil is dark and visible in the end. So you see how it's light here, you can't really see the pencil marks. Here right now it's very, very dark because I wanted you guys to see it better. But now that we sketched everything, I'm actually going to lighten it up a little bit. Just a touch, because again, I'm not a big fan of really harsh outline on the light sections. So I'm going to lighten it up. If you prefer harsher outline, that's okay, keep it. It is a personal preference. So whatever your personal preference is, do that. You don't have to have the same preference as I do, but my personal preference is I like not seeing my lines as harsh. Just on the leaves mostly, because those are going to be quite light in the end. Let me fix them a little bit. But yeah, just don't want them super harsh. And that's pretty much it for a sketch. After this, we can move to our painting part. Alright, and now it's time to move on to painting. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to put my ruler and my eraser and my pencil away, because we're not going to need them anymore. And what I'm going to grab is, I'm going to grab my paint. So what you will need now, you're going to need water, to make sure you have that. You're going to need a couple different brushes. It doesn't really matter how many brushes you're going to have. Just make sure you have a good small brush. For this particular one, I'm going to be using, what is this? Oh, the number, oh, here we go, 0. This is number 0, pointy. This is the most ideal brush for this. But if you don't have number 0, that's okay. As long as you have a small brush with a pointy tip, that's all that matters. That's what you need. Because there are lots of fine details here, and we're going to need a fine detail brush for this. On top of that, it's good to have a couple different brushes. I'm going to have a medium pointy brush and a large pointy brush, but really just one of those is also good, because, you know, just for larger areas, it's good to have a larger brush. So 3 brushes is ideal, but just 2 brushes or 2 brushes like that is also okay. And the other 2 don't have to be pointy, but I prefer using all pointy brushes for watercolor. And generally, the most ideal for watercolor is a soft bristle pointy brush. Those are the most ideal, but use whatever you guys have. And of course, we're going to need paint. I'm going to be using my Koi watercolor set, but you're welcome to use anything that you have. And I'm going to be showing you guys my colors, because as you can see here, it's very hard to see what's going on. I'm going to be showing you my colors here on this palette that, you know, it's just a bit more understandable. It makes a little more sense of what colors we're going to be using. And again, if you don't have a palette that's as elaborate as mine, and you only have, let's say, a small 6-color palette, that's okay too. I'm going to show you how to mix those colors from more of a standard colors. If you have a great, big, elaborate palette, awesome. And generally, you can switch all the colors that you want here. You don't have to stick precisely with the colors that I'm using. Use your own colors, and it's still going to turn out really good in the end. It may look a little different, but that's okay. So that's completely up to you. For those who are using acrylic, you're welcome to use acrylic. You're welcome to either use pre-mixed colors or primary colors and mix them into shades that we're going to be using. But just make sure you're going to really water down them to watercolor consistency, which should be more like just a dirty water consistency. But we'll get there. And of course, paper towel. Paper towel is important, or reusable fabric cloth, whatever you guys prefer there. So what I'm going to start here with is I'm going to start with my wooden birdhouse. And the color that I'm going to start with is just going to be brown. Any shade of brown that you have. In my case, I actually have a variety of browns here. I have lots and lots and lots of those guys. So all those are browns. So for me personally, I think I'm going to start with just like a very standard, I think the most standard brown is this one out of them. Again, you start with any brown that you have. And with watercolor, I always put my color onto my palette first. I'm actually going to zoom out a little bit so you can see it better. And this is the consistency that I was talking about. You see, it's like I'm using a dirty water versus actually using pigment. So if you're using watercolor, never go from here to here. Always from here to here first. Because A, you need to accumulate enough of that paint, and B, you need to see how transparent or how non-transparent it is, how saturated the paint is. And we're just going to color in the entire thing with it, with the vertical brushstrokes. It doesn't have to be vertical brushstrokes on the large areas. On smaller areas, it could be non-vertical brushstrokes, clearly. If you make it a brushstroke, that's a good thing. So don't try to, have it smooth. Sometimes I just use straight water as well to help my paint spread. Try not to get it onto your bird and leaves and flowers. If you get it a little bit, it's not a big deal, but try not to get it onto them. Because unlike with acrylic, watercolor is very transparent, so we're not going to be using too much white. So when we're going to be using, we're going to be moving onto our leaves and bird and flowers, we're not going to be using solid colors. Again, everything is going to be transparent. So if you put brown underneath it, you're going to see brown underneath it. Green is, and color, whatever colors we use here, is going to overlap it. So you're still going to be seeing everything that you layer. So that's why everything that's supposed to be different colors, you have to kind of avoid that area. Or at least avoid it as much as possible. And remember, brushstroke is good here. We're not trying to make it non-brushstrokey. Brushstroke is great as long as brushstrokes are vertical. Of course, you can change the brush whenever you need to. In my case, because all my brushes are pointy, they have a really nice pointy tip. You see, they can make really, oh, you can't see it there, but all my brushes can make a really fine lines because they have a really pointy tip. So regardless of which size I'm using, even with the biggest brush, I can get a really nice fine line because of that pointy tip. So I don't really need to ever switch the brush technically, but if you find that your brush just doesn't do it, then switch as much as needed. So whenever you feel like, oh, this brush is not doing it for me anymore, switch the brush. If you're, let's say, working on small areas, I need a smaller brush, go for it. So now I'm going to grab a bit more saturated color. So you see I just mixed a bit more pigment. And I'm going to go over it again. And this time I'm going to more intentionally add the streakiness. So on the top it's going to be following the shape of it. And on the bottom it's going to be vertical. And of course use quite a bit of water because watercolor, that's why it's called watercolor, it requires a decent use of water. I'll smudge it in a couple areas. Okay, I think this is good for this particular color. I don't really want to be using any more of it. I think I'm going to switch to my next color. So for the next color, I have this one pre-mixed, but you guys, if you don't have it pre-mixed, it's really easy to mix. You see, you have this red or brown. This is like a red brick kind of color. If you guys have it pre-mixed, you're welcome to use it, or anything on a redder side. If you don't, it's an easy mix. You grab the brown that you have, any of the standard browns, whatever yours looks like, and you mix it with red, any red, and it's going to bring you to something similar to that. So if you don't have this one pre-mixed, just mix brown with some red, and that's all. And with that mixture, you're going to be coloring next. I'm going to grab my pre-mixed one. Let's put it here. So see right here, it's like a brick color. And with this brick color, I'm going to go lower. And notice my layer, the one that we just added before that, is actually dry already. So I'm not adding it over the wet color. I kind of let that one dry up a little bit. It's still somewhat wet, but it's not fully wet. Because otherwise they'll just blend and you're not going to see those defined layers. So that's why I let that one, the first one, dry up just a touch more before adding this one. And of course, let's add some on the top as well. Okay, that's quite a nice base that is happening here. We still have quite a bit to go because we're going to be darkening it up more and more and more. This is just layering. We still have a few more colors to add, but now I actually want it to dry because there's already a lot of paint here, so I don't want to continue until this properly dries. And while that's drying, we can start working on other areas. So I'm going to wash up this brush and I'm going to put it aside, and you're going to grab either medium or small brush for the next step. It's totally up to you whether you want to work with a medium brush or small brush, whichever you prefer. I generally find that a small brush is easier, usually, but if your medium brush has a pointed tip, again, it's versatile. You can use just the tip for small details and the full width or pushing a little bit harder for larger areas. And I want to move on to our flower here. So for a flower, I'm going to use a couple different colors. I'm going to use an orangey color. I'm going to use pink or redder color. So I'm going to use this color. This is like a salmon color. If you don't have this color, it's not a very standard color. If you don't have it, you're going to grab your orange of some kind. You're going to grab a pink. So orange and pink will bring you something similar to this. So I'm going to use this color. Another color that I'm going to use is a warm yellow or something between orange and yellow. So not straight yellow, but it's yellow that has like a hint of orange. Again, it's not a standard color, so if you don't have it, you just grab any yellow that you have and add a smidge of orange or red to it, and it should bring you right here. So let's put those colors on our palette first. Here's one of them, this warm yellow. Then here's the second one, the salmon color. Again, that's orange and pink if you don't have it pre-mixed. And I'm going to use some sort of beautiful red that has more of a magenta undertone to it. So I would say maybe this one or this one. But again, any that red that you have, you can use. But if you prefer it a little bit more similar to mine, I would say use something that has more of a magenta or like a raspberry undertone versus orangey undertone. So you want it more on a pinker side and generally darker. So again, if you have that, great. If not, you use the red that you have, or you can mix a couple colors. You can use the darkest red that you have and then add a bit of pink to it to give it that magenta or like pinker undertone. And what I'm going to do, these three colors I'm going to use. I'm going to start with this one. And literally on all flower petals of this flower, I'm going to add some of this color quite fast. You have to be working fast here because you have to do this all while it's wet. Once it dries, you're not going to be able to mix it, so just to work fast. Don't take any breaks until this is done. You see some yellow, fast with lots of water. Now lots of water again. I'm getting my orange and I'm adding it in while everything is still wet so it blends nicely. If it doesn't blend just by itself as we work on it, I'm going to blend it manually in a second, and that's okay too. All right, and the last one, I'm going to use this red and add it into the mixture. So definitely adding it closer to the middle of our flower. But also if you want to add it a little bit anywhere else, you can. Again, just do it fast and use a decent amount of water because otherwise it's just not going to blend in the end. And we do want it to blend. And for the middle, I'm going to use either orange or yellow, again, something along those lines. Something lighter, so let's add this one. Okay, great. Now I'm going to wash off my brush, dab it off on a paper towel, again, pretty fast, and with a clean, wet brush, I'm just going to go over certain areas and I'm going to blend them. So if you like this look more, a bit more patchy, a bit more defined colors, you don't have to blend it. I personally prefer it a little bit smoother here, so that's why I'm going over with a clean, slightly wet brush. And I'm kind of moving my paint around a little. So again, I'm washing it off, dabbing it off on a paper towel, just to remove the excess paint. Sorry, excess water, but my brush is still wet. It's not dry at all. And then with remaining water, I'm just moving this paint around. So this is a great first layer, like a base layer for this flower. Now we're going to do the same thing for our second flower. And again, this is just a base layer for it. So again, I'm going to start with my yellow, a bit of that. Then I'm going to take my salmon / orange. And then I'm going to grab my red. And I'm going to do that next. Alright, then again, wash off my brush, dab it off on a paper towel, and now I'm going to go ahead and just blend them a little bit. Only if you want to. You don't have to. You can just keep it as is. That would be also fine. And again, remember, this is just the first layer, just like an underlay for our flowers. We're totally not done with it. There's still a lot to go. Now, while our flowers are drying, we can do an underlay on our leaves. Oh, sorry guys, let's do the flower buds too. Flower buds, the same thing. You don't have to use all 4 colors. You can just use 2 colors. Sorry, you don't have to use all 3 colors. You can just use 2 colors. In my case, I'm going to use my salmon and my red. Great. Now, by the way, if you wanted to take a break, this would be a really good time to do it because nothing else needs to be done on wet. So this is a good time that you can just let things dry and take a break if you needed to. But I'm gonna go on to my leaves, and leaves we're gonna do in a couple different colors as well. So we're gonna start with a yellowy green, so very light, almost yellow green. Then we're gonna add medium green, and then we're gonna add dark green. You can add as many shades of green as you want, by the way. You don't have to limit yourself to what I'm using. If you want to add more shades of green, go for it. If you want to actually cut down shades of green, that's okay too. So I'm going to start by mixing some yellow and some green to make nice, really light, almost like a lime green, or even, more yellow than that. It's like a mixture between yellow and green, literally. And with this, I'm just going to add some on the leaves. So now I'm adding on more like an upper part of the leaves. You don't have to add it on every single leaf, or you can. It's not a mistake if you do, it's not a mistake if you don't. I want to add it on every single leaf personally. So just the upper parts. Alright, that's done. Now I'm going to move on to my darker green. So just add a bit more green. Standard green, darker green, doesn't matter. To the same mixture, just add a bit more green. You should get more of a standard green. This is just a little bit darker. And with this, I'm just going to continue filling in the leaves so they're fully colored in. Because before I just colored half, right? Now I want them fully colored in. And this is not a dark color either. Alright, so do you see? Ups are colored with my light yellowy green, the bottoms are colored with my medium green. It's still fairly light, but it's a little bit darker than the first one. And now we can work on even darker green. So now I'm gonna grab actual pre-mixed green. This is like emerald green, so it's a bit colder green and a bit darker green. You can see it here. Again, it's not super dark, but it is a little bit colder and a little bit darker than the other greens that I've been using. If you guys don't have this one pre-mixed, it's not a very standard color. You may or may not have it. If you don't have it, it's very easy to mix. So to mix this color, you grab any green that you have and mix it with blue. So dark blue plus standard green will bring you right here to this color. No black, don't add any black, just dark green, dark blue, the darkest blue that you have, and standard green. And with this color, we're going to start adding a bit more of it closer to the bottoms of our leaves. And use just the tip of your brush, or use a small brush for this, whatever you prefer. I prefer to continue using my medium brush. I like this brush, but I'm using just the tip at this point. So I get more of a defined lines here. And here maybe I'll even color the entire leaf or a bigger section of it. As I get closer to the bottom. I'll add those two leaves fully colored here. And this two. And this two. right, and again, we're not done with them. We actually still have two more colors to go for our green, but this is great. This is a really good start, I would say, here. So what we're going to do next is, because this have dried up already, we can continue working on it. Let's work a little bit more there, and then, you know, as we let that dry, we'll continue working back here again. So now I'm actually going to add even redder color. I'm going to choose something similar to this pinker color that I used, and I'm going to brush it through. And it's just going to give it this warmer, pinker, more purple even undertone. So just using the same red I used for my flowers, and you have to water it down. So if you don't water it down, it's going to be too red, and we don't want that. So water it down really well, and then just bring a little bit of it in. I'm mostly bringing it from the top. I'm not going to bring it all the way. Bring it here and a little bit here. Alright, I'm happy with this. I added just enough of that color. I don't want to be adding any more. And again, now I have to wait until it dries up a little bit. So as that's drying up, let's work on our bird. So for the bird, I'm going to start with this yellowy part, so with this lighter part. And I'm going to use the yellowy orange color. So do you remember I showed you that I have this kind of colors, but I also have this kind of colors. This color is like a sand color. So it's similar to that, but it has a smidge of brown. So we're aiming to have this orangey color. So yellow mixed with orange, or a smidge of red, bring this here, and then a smidge of brown to kind of dim it a little bit down so it's not so crazy vibrant. So if you have a dark color premixed, great, or something similar premixed, awesome. If you don't, you just grab yellow, a little bit of orange, mix it in, so it brings you to this, like a mixture between yellow and orange. And then to that, you're going to add a smidge of brown, just a tiny smidge. You see, it brings it more into this brown color scheme. And with that, we're going to start with quite watered down, and you're going to add a small details. Let's get closer for this one. Okay, now I'm going to dab off my brush on a paper towel without washing it, just dabbing it off. And with whatever I have left, which is very little, I'm going to add a bit more here. See, it looks quite furry, quite feathery. And then I'm going to refill my brush, and you see this is lighter and the edge is darker. That's what you want. And then I'm going to refill my brush with the same color, and I'm going to color this in fully, the wing. And we're going to color it later with another color. This is just the base for it. And I'm going to color the top fully as well. Alright, great. Now I'm going to grab even more of that color, so a bit more orange. This time I'm not going to be adding any brown to it. And with this, I'm just going to add a little bit more on the edge here. On the inside, on the inner part. Awesome. Now I'm going to go to my standard brown. Whatever your standard brown looks like, go to that color. For me, my standard brown is the one we started painting with. And using the standard brown, I'm going to add a couple of more strokes here. And I'm going to color in my tail as well. And the same with the top. And for the inner part, I'm actually going to grab gray. So if you have gray, you can use it. If not, just grab black but watered down so it's not super solid black. And color it in just one layer for now. This is pretty good. Okay, I think that's drying because we're going to let it dry. As that's drying, I think this is dry enough for us to continue working. So now we're actually going to use just black, straight black here. Again, not super solid. We're going to use quite watered down black, so it's going to be more like looking like gray. This is the one that I'm using here, so that's the one. So it's black, but it's watered down. And I'm going to start underneath here. I'm going to put a line, and then right away from that line, I'm going to start washing it down into the birdhouse. So a little bit from the top. Now, do you see this little ledge here? I'm going to work around this ledge as well. I'm going to put a line up, and bring it from that line, and then line down. And I'm going to bring it down from that line. And a little bit right here. And of course, a little bit on the very top, so on that line. And notice this is still quite transparent black. I'm not using solid black just yet. I will be, but not on this step. But again, we're building the intensity here. We're doing layers and layers and layers. And as we go, we're building the intensity. All right. And after that, I'm going to go with more of a darker black. Again, it's not going to be a super solid black, but it's going to be darker. Or you can use the same color, just add less of it. So the same thing from the top. All right, and I'm gonna color in this middle, this hard part. Okay, awesome. Right, awesome. Let's go back again. Let's let it dry, and let's go back to our flowers here and our leaves, and we can work on them a little bit more. And I'm going to use my small brush this time, and I'm going to use a watered down red. So do you remember that red that we were using? I'm going to continue using that. So this is the color, but quite watered down. I wouldn't say that's super watered down, but a medium. And with this, I'm going to do this. I'm going to add flicks from the inside out. See, I usually flick them from the inside out, but if you need to flick them the other way around, that's okay too. It's not really a big deal. Alright, now let's go to our leaves. Now I'm going to use the darkest green. So in my case, it's a pre-mix green, so this is what I'm going to be using here. It's pretty dark, as you can see. If you don't have this one, again, it's pretty easy to mix. And what you do, you grab your standard green. So let's say this is your standard green, right? You grab your dark blue, one of them, whichever, doesn't matter, some dark blue. So it's going to bring you to that darker green color, and then you have a smidge of black. So standard green plus some dark blue plus a tiny smidge of black will bring you right to this color. And I'm going to grab a bit of that, not a lot. And I'm going to add it onto my leaves. So just linear as a little highlight. You can add it to some of them, you can add it to all of them, it's completely up to you. It's a nice color to add some contrast here, but it's up to you to choose how much of it you would like to have in the end. And you can add more, you can add less. And I recommend using the smallest brush for this. All right, and now I might as well add my background because I don't have the background yet, and it's about time for us to start adding it. You can use either the large brush or the medium brush, something on a bigger side. I just wouldn't recommend the smallest one. And the colors that we're going to be using for our background is all the colors that are currently present here. So the colors of flowers, which is orange, that peachy coral color, and that red color, plus the green. I'm going to be only using the darkest green, so something on the darker side, and that's pretty much it. You guys can use other colors too, it's up to you, but I like having my background a little bit more muted. So I'm going to start with that orangey color that I used for my flowers. I'm going to grab a bit of that and very lightly, super watered down. in a really big pile. I'm going to add it here. Do you see how light it is? And let's add it a little bit here as well on this side. Maybe a little bit here. So lots and lots of water. Then I'm going to grab that coral color that I was using on my flowers as well. Do you remember the one that orange mixed with some pink? I'll add a little bit of that here. I'll water it down. I'll just spread it with some straight water to make it a little more transparent and not as bright and, vibrant. I don't really need that. I don't need my background to compete with my flowers, with my bird, with my leaves. I want my background a little more muted. So I'll just add a little bit of that. Just a bit. Then I'm going to move to my red. So I'm going to use the red that I used for the flowers as well. And again, quite watered down. I'm not looking to get to the intensity that I have here. You can work around your leaves, that would be best, but if not, that's okay too. And again, we'll spread it with just straight water. And we'll add a bit of that color right here too. Anywhere else that you want. For me, this is quite enough. And my darkest green, or some dark green. Add it here. And again, it's just water. We'll spread it a little. Just clean water. Lots of it. And where else? Where else? Where else? Right here, right? Just a little bit. Great, let's spread it too. And what else? What else? What else? Right here, right? And again, we'll just spread it a little bit with water towards the outside to create more of a smoother transition into the background. That's our background. Okay, now I'm going to switch my brush again. So I'm going to wash off my large brush, put it aside, and I'm going to go to my small brush this time. And I'm going to move to my red once again. So I'm going to be using my red. You can either use red super straight and just quite saturated, or you can even add a smidge of black into it. I think I'm just going to go with saturated red. And again, we're going to add a bit more flicks from the inside out, and you see they're darker this time. I'm going to move closer to show you closer. But again, you can add a smidge of black to it as well if you wanted to. If you feel like you're capped out on the darkness and it's just not getting any darker, you can add a smidge of black, but not too much, because otherwise it's just going to be very dim. And again, none of this has to be done on wet. Like a background has to be done on wet, but all this, you can totally take a break. None of this has to be done on wet. So if you need to take a break before you do that, totally fine. And now we're going to move to a straight black, still using a small brush. Actually, let's use a bit of watered down black first. Sorry, guys. So I'm going to grab a kind of medium watered down black so I can show you. It's still black. It's not super light, but it's not super dark either. It's like a medium. And with this, we're going to add a couple of brush strokes on our bird. So here, I'm going to start with the wing. I'm going to add a couple of lines here. Beak, I'm going to color in the bottom part. And then I'm going to add a couple of feather-like little brush strokes around here to darken up this section where the belly connects to the wing. I'm going down this line that connects the orange part with the gray part. Here and here, a couple of brush strokes. And then we're going to add a couple right here going down this line. And then a bit filling in the top. Not fully, you see there's still certain areas that are a bit lighter, but along the line and some filling from the top. And now we're going to use the darkest black. So literally straight black. Again, still quite a bit of water because it's a watercolor technique. Then you shouldn't be using it like an acrylic paint. You should still use quite a bit of water. You see, but it's pretty solid. And with this, we're just going to start adding details in the solid black. So just like a flick here and there, and a birdhouse. Couple of lines if you want to. Then we're going to move to a bird. I guess my paper is a little warped here. Getting a little warped, so my lines kind of look not very straight, but that's okay. All right, so just a bit of on the beak here, the eye. Again, a little bit down this line. Couple small brush strokes. Color in some top. Then a couple lines right here where the wing is separated from the belly. To darken up that section. What else? One, you can add a bit on the tail. Just like a little touch here. Then we're going to add some on our leaves. So I'm adding just a touch, almost like an outline slash the middle line. See, just a touch to accentuate the shape of my leaves. You don't have to do that, but you can. Optional, just make sure you use the smallest brush that's available. All right, and for the flowers here, if you want to, you can add just a bit of separation here. You don't have to though. This is super optional. And then what you need to add is a couple little lines. So from each side, right, like this towards the middle, a couple lines. Yeah, pretty much like that. And I would say this is pretty much it for our black. Now I want to add one more little thing in green, and then I'm going to move to my white. So I'm going to grab my small brush, a little bit of a dark green as well, some dark green, doesn't matter which one. And I'm going to add those little things that we sketched or didn't sketch. So again, you start with like a stem, you put a couple lines from the inside out. They don't have to be super solid, they can be quite transparent or they can be solid. It's totally up to you. And then we're going to add quite a few dabs on the end. All right, and now it is time for our white. So guys, we're still not done, by the way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put away my watercolor because I'm going to be using white from my acrylic. Let's put this away to save some space, to make sure I have enough space here on my table. And I'm going to quickly get a little bit of white acrylic. Or you can use white in something that's a bit more solid than watercolor. If you don't have that, you're welcome to use watercolor, but generally you're looking for something a little more solid. Watercolor is a bit transparent. Watercolor, you're actually not meant to use white at all. That's why watercolor white kind of sucks. So I have my white here, white acrylic, and I'm going to use my small brush. So I'm going to start by taking some of it aside, and I'm going to water it down. So I'm going to take some aside, water it down a bit to make it a little more liquid. It's still going to be quite white. And with this white, I'm going to start adding vertical lines over those large wooden planks of a birdhouse. Notice I'm not going too high up because that section is supposed to be dark, so I'm kind of avoiding it. I'm lightening up, I'm doing like a white wash on a section that is already quite light. If you wanted to add a couple of solid white brush strokes, you can too. So whitewash this part too. And let's whitewash this top a little bit. And go around my heart. It's okay. If it turns out a little too messy, you can always fix it with black later too. Alright, now at the top a little bit. After that, we're going to add just a bit of white, only if you want to, on some of the leaves, just like a little highlight. You don't have to if you don't want to. It's totally fine not to have it. And on some of the flowers as well. So I usually do just the tips. And then we're going to do the middle of our flowers. So that's where you grab quite a bit of white on your brush and you do lots of dots right in the middle. And then a couple dots right here on the ends of those black lines. Now, they don't have to match precisely the ends of those black lines, but kind of in that general area. And a little glare on our bird. Anywhere else where you want to add highlights, absolutely go for it, wherever that may be. For me personally, I want to just add a couple dots here and there, so I'm going to take a bit more white on the tip of my brush, and I'm just going to dot it up a bit. See, I'm not evenly spreading them, I'm doing more like in groups. So a group of a couple dot here, a group of a couple dot there, and so on. And this is enough dots for me. What else do I want to do? I kind of want to fix up my heart. It's not perfect, so let me grab a bit more black here. Just let's fix it up a little bit. It bothers me that it's not looking the way it should. Oh yeah, I like that more. That looks better to me. And that is it, guys. After this, the only thing that is left for us here to do is sign it. So find a good spot wherever that may be. And you can sign it with a pen, you can sign it with a brush, you can put a name or just the initials or signature, anything that you prefer. I will sign it right here this time. I'll just put my initials. And that is pretty much it. And guys, if you want to, let's say you did it once and it turned out great and you want to make this again as a gift for someone, experiment with the colors. Do it again, try different colors. As long as you follow the same general structure, you can do any colors and it will still look really, really great. So feel free to experiment with that. Feel free to do it with different color flowers, with different color background, maybe even different color bird. Whatever you can come up with, wherever your imagination takes you. And after you're done, if you want to share it with us, feel free to post it on our Facebook group dedicated specifically to watercolor. It's a peer support group where we encourage everyone to post their paintings. So it's called Watercolor Lovers by Artist Palette Durham Region. You can find it on Facebook. Just put this in search bar and it will pop up. And feel free to post it there so we can see it and everyone else who's on the same journey of discovering watercolor can see it as well. And if you guys enjoyed this tutorial and you want to say thank you by tipping me, I would never say no to that. You can do that as well. You can find a PayPal link for tips in the description of this video. So feel free to do that, no obligation at all, but of course tips are always greatly appreciated. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it, and let's do this again sometime soon. Bye everyone.